Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajakacarya Ashtotara Shatasishimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Samstapakacharya His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama-shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 11, titled Lord Krishna's Entrance into Dwaraka. Text 35. Sa eṣaḥ nara-lokesmin avatīrṇaḥ svamāyayā reme strī-ratna kūṭasthaḥ bhagavān prākṛtaḥ yathā sa eṣaḥ nara-lokesmin avatīrṇaḥ svamāyayā reme strī-ratna kūṭasthaḥ bhagavān prākṛto yathā sa eṣaḥ nara-loke asmin avatīrṇaḥ māyayā reme strī-ratna kūṭasthaḥ bhagavān prākṛto yathā sa eṣaḥ nara-loke asmin avatīrṇaḥ māyayā reme strī-ratna kūṭasthaḥ bhagavān prākṛto yathā sa eṣaḥ nara-loke asmin avatīrṇaḥ māyayā reme strī-ratna kūṭasthaḥ bhagavān prākṛto yathā. Sa eṣaḥ nara-loke asmin bhagavān prākṛto yathā. Saha, he, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. eṣaḥ, all these. Nara-loke, on this planet of human beings. Asmin, on this. Avatīrṇaḥ, having appeared. Swa, personal, internal. Māyayā, causeless mercy. Reme, enjoyed. strī-ratna, woman who is competent to become a wife of the Lord. kūṭasthaḥ, among. bhagavān, the personality of Godhead. prākṛtaḥ, mundane. yathā, as if it were. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Śrīla Prabhupada. Jai Śrīla Prabhupada. Translation. That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Śrī Kṛṣṇa, out of His causeless mercy, appeared on this planet by His internal potency and enjoyed Himself among competent women as if He were engaging in mundane affairs. Purport. The Lord married and lived like a householder. This is certainly like a mundane affair. But when we learn that He married 16,108 wives and lived with them separately in each and every palace, certainly it is not mundane. Therefore, the Lord, living as a householder amongst His competent wives, is never mundane, and His behavior with them is never to be understood as mundane sex relation. The women who became the wives of the Lord are certainly not ordinary women, because to get the Lord as one's husband is the result of many, many millions of births, tapasya, austerity. When the Lord appears on different lokas or planets, or on this planet of human beings, he displays his transcendental pastimes just to attract the conditioned souls to become his eternal servitors, friends, parents, and lovers, respectively, in the transcendental world, where the Lord eternally reciprocates such exchanges of service. Service is pervertedly represented in the material world and broken untimely, resulting in sad experience. The illusioned living being, conditioned by material nature, cannot understand out of ignorance that all of our relations here in the mundane world are temporary and full of inebriaties. Such relations cannot help us be happy perpetually, but if the same relation is established with the Lord, then we are transferred to the transcendental world after leaving this material body and become eternally related with Him in the relation we desire. The women amongst whom he lived as their husband are not, therefore, women of this mundane world, but are eternally related with him as transcendental wives, a position which they attain by perfection of devotional service. That is their competency. The Lord is Param Brahma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Conditioned souls seek after perpetual happiness in all places, not only on this earth, but also on other planets throughout the universe. Because constitutionally, a spiritual spark, as he is, can travel to any part of God's creation. But being conditioned by the material modes, he tries to travel in space by spacecraft and so fails to reach his destination. The law of gravitation is binding upon him like the shackles of a prisoner. By other processes, he can reach anywhere. But even if he reaches the highest planet, he cannot attain that perpetual happiness for which he is searching life after life. When he comes to his senses, however, he seeks after Brahman happiness, knowing it for certain that unlimited happiness which he is seeking is never attainable in the material world. As such, the Supreme Being, Parabrahman, certainly does not seek his happiness anywhere in the material world, nor can his paraphernalia of happiness be found in the material world. He is not impersonal, because he is the leader and Supreme Being amongst innumerable living beings. He cannot be impersonal. He is exactly like us, and he has all the propensities of an individual living being in fullness. He marries exactly like us, but his marriage is neither mundane nor limited by our experience in the conditioned state. His wives, therefore, appear like mundane women, but factually, they are all transcendental, liberated souls, perfect manifestations of internal energy. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of Canto 1, Chapter 11 in the matter of Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwaraka, text 35. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Gyananjana-shlakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shayutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadautam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swaminiti Namine Namacharya Padaya Nitai Kripa Pradayine Gaurakatha Dhamadaya Nagragramatarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Gopi Paranadhanatase Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatharine Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Śrī Kṛṣṇa Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yatkripatamaham bande Shri Guruntarinam yatkripatamaham bande Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Katanchana smrite yasmin dushkaram sukaram bhavet Vismrite vipritam syat Śrī Caitanyam namamitam. So, in this chapter, there is a description of the residents of Dwaraka. And Srila Prabhupada contrasts, he brings out the difference between ordinary mundane living entities and the associates of the Lord in Dwaraka. So, one important thing to understand here is Prabhupada uses expressions like when the living entity comes back to his senses. In this purport also uses that expression. So, living material life is a state of madness. It is a state of abnormality. So, coming back to senses means coming back to our normal state. So today we have our doctor sitting here in the assembly. So it inspires me to speak a little bit in medical terms. So we've been going through a pandemic in the last 1.5 years. But relatively from the perspective of the Bhagavatam, this is a very insignificant pandemic. Because we have a greater problem. This coronavirus has a mortality rate of maybe 1% or something. But there is a greater virus that we are dealing with, which is called the Bhavaroga virus. And it's very dangerous because the mortality is 100%. No exceptions. And not only that, first of all, it makes a person mad. Then it kills the person also, endlessly. So that is what is our current state, that we have been afflicted with this Bhavaroga virus, which has made us mad. And not only has it made us mad, but it also kills us endlessly, life after life after life after life. So this is what the Bhagavatam is trying to open our eyes to. Prabhupada, by presenting the Bhagavatam, is trying to bring us to this reality that we are in a very, very dangerous situation. And we need to understand that situation and get out of it. When we've been going through this pandemic, generally people across the world have been in a mode of panic. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They're quite uncertain. Unlike that, for us, we have a very definite solution. The Bhagavatam is presenting a very definite solution, and it works 100%. And it begins with Shrinavatam Swakata Krishna. So by hearing the Bhagavatam and chanting the names of the Lord. So this is the definite cure that for this very dangerous virus called the Bhavaroga virus. So the beauty of it is that the process of devotional service, Prabhupada used the expression Krishna consciousness from Rupa Goswami's Krishna Bhavanamrita. Krishna consciousness from Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. Rupa Goswami uses the expression called Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. Krishna Bhakti Rasa, the mellow of devotional service. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita, saturated with the consciousness which is saturated with Krishna Bhakti Rasa. That consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So, Prabhupada, the process of Krishna consciousness that he gave us is very, very attractive. The moment one begins this process, one feels that rasa, the Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So, because of which one becomes very spontaneously attracted to pure devotional service. And pure devotional service completely satisfies the heart. It's called yayatma suprasidati. Here it's explained how, in this verse, Prabhupada explains how living entities are traveling from to different universes, life after life, trying to find that happiness. Yet that happiness becomes instantly available when we chant the names of Krishna and hear the Bhagavatam and chant the names of Krishna. So it immediately puts us in touch with transcendental happiness. And so you can see in the material world is a kind of madness. They call it the rat race, and it's quite visible in our eyes. Just as the madness of the material world is visible before our eyes, if we just go back into history from 1965 to 1977, at least during that phase, we can see that Prabhupada actually reversed this kind of madness with another kind of madness, the madness of Krishna consciousness. If we hear the stories and of those who joined the Krishna consciousness movement, each of those stories is hard to imagine. It's very hard to imagine how people could do those kind of things. That is the power of a eternal associate of the Lord. That is the power of Srila Prabhupada's Bhakti Shakti. That just by his presence, by his talking, by his association, he could infuse that Krishna Bhakti rasa. So sometimes we may think, okay, Srila Prabhupada is not there now. And we don't see that similar kind of course there is fervor of Krishna consciousness even today, but we don't see that similar kind of madness, that attraction for Krishna consciousness. Ravindra Swarup Prabhu was once explaining that during Prabhupada's days, the Grihastha ashram used to be one dormitory, maybe like this, one hall like this, and the Grihastha couples would be separated from each other using saris as partition. Yet they were ecstatic, they were very happy. You know, today the first thing people would think in general is, oh, what apartment am I going to get? Is it going to be comfortable? These are the things which come. But during Prabhupada's time, the taste of Krishna consciousness was so overwhelming. People consider these things as insignificant. Of course, someone could say, because it was impractical, therefore it did not last. But that's not the reason. The reason is because of when the fervor gets lost, everything becomes lost. So the point is, so Prabhupada actually practically demonstrated this, that people willing to surrender. I forget the name of the professor who writes in Prabhupada's biography, in his review, he says that what is most unbelievable is the spontaneous willingness of young men and women to surrender to someone, an authority figure, especially in a time where authorities were challenged. But here is young people and spontaneously being drawn to an elderly gentleman and surrendering their lives unto him. Because Prabhupada brought this magic of Krishna Bhakti Rasa. So we are maddened by the Bhavaroga virus, but there is a strong antidote. It is the Krishna Bhakti Rasa. And last week, I was, a friend of mine, he sent me a very interesting thing. It is from Vedanta Desika's comments on the Bhagavad Gita. Vedanta Desika is a very famous follower of Ramanujacharya. Now, Vedanta Desika, he says that there are 4 levels of sense control. Very beautiful levels. He's kind of brought that out very clearly. What does sense control mean? He says there are 4 levels of sense control. Now, why do I speak about sense control now? So far as talking about Krishna Bhakti Rasa. Now, why do I suddenly bring in this sense control now? Because Krishna Bhakti Rasa and sense control go hand in hand. Like Prabhupada says that when a person is hungry, and this is from the Bhagavatam, that when a person is hungry and they eat food, 2 things happen, which is they feel nourishment from the food and also hunger goes away. So the process of Krishna consciousness is like this, that when we chant the holy names, when we hear the Bhagavatam, when we chant the holy names, then our attraction for Krishna, our madness for Krishna begins to develop. Simultaneously, we also spontaneously begin to control our senses. We don't have to make a separate endeavor to control our senses. The process of Krishna consciousness itself enables us to control our senses. So this Vedanta Desika's comments were interesting because we can know at what level of sense control we are. What level of sense control we are. So he says that essentially there are 4 levels, and these actually correspond to the levels of willing, feeling and thinking. So he gives a very specific detail. He says that the stage 1 of sense control, that's called yathā. In the stage of yathā, one is spontaneously attracted to a worldly desirable sense object. One is spontaneously attracted when one sees a worldly desirable sense object. So one forcibly turns one's eyes away or the senses away from what one is spontaneously attracted to. This is called the stage of yathā. It's sense control, but one is doing it with some force. Then the next level of sense control is vatīrṇaḥ, where when one sees a worldly desirable sense object, one is not spontaneously attracted by it, but one feels happiness upon seeing that. So that is the stage of vatīrṇaḥ. One is not spontaneously attracted, one is not struggling to take one's mind away from it, but one is still feeling happiness upon seeing that worldly desirable sense object. The third stage of sense control is when one sees a worldly desirable sense object, one neither feels spontaneous attraction towards it, nor one feels happiness upon seeing it, but one still considers it as a worldly desirable sense object. And then there is that is called the stage of Ekindriya. And then there is the final stage, which is called the Vasikara stage, where when one sees a worldly desirable sense object, he does not even consider it as a desirable sense object, does not even consider it as desirable. So that is the highest stage of sense control, where even when one sees a worldly desirable sense object, he does not even consider that it is a desirable object. So actually, if you look at it, these 4 stages, first stage corresponds to the level of willing. One wants to do it, one is spontaneously attracted to it, but one is taking oneself away from it. So that's the stage of willing. The next stage, one is not willing, one is not trying to forcibly drag oneself away from it, because there is no spontaneous attraction. Still, there is some attraction. There is some happiness when one sees it. So that is the stage of feeling happiness when one is seeing it. Then the third stage is one is still considering it as a worldly desirable sense object. So then that is the stage of thinking. So when one transcends these 3 stages, then one is properly situated. So I remember when I gave a Russian class a few days ago, and I gave this 4 classification. And instantly, in the question and session, one Mataji asked me, so would this mean that by the practice of Krishna consciousness, we would become dry in our relationships with people? Because, of course, Krishna Bhakti Rasa one is experiencing internally, but would it mean that in our relationships, we would become dry? So, no. In fact, we would become more loving in our relationships. The stage of vatīrṇaḥ means, the stage of Vasikara means when one looks at a material object, one does not think it is a object for one's enjoyment. That is the stage. Rather, one begins to look at it as Krishna's energy. This is Krishna's energy. So, when one sees things as Krishna's energy, then one thinks, how can one engage that energy in Krishna's service? So take for example the Grihasthas. So the Grihasthas have a family, and there is wife, husband, children and all these things. So when one does not see family members as objects for one's own enjoyment, one can actually begin to really love them. Okay, what can I do for my wife's spiritual advancement? What can I do for my children's spiritual advancement? You're not thinking, how can my wife give me some pleasure? How can she do this for me? How can she do that for me? You're not thinking how the children can fulfill your unfulfilled desires when you are a child. Most parents think that, I'm not talking devotee parents. In general, parents think that, okay, they had some desires in this world, whatever they could not accomplish, when the children grow up, at least they should accomplish it. That is the general concept of, the mundane parenthood. But in Krishna consciousness, it means that we see whatever is good for them, let that happen to them. So that is an actual stage of loving. So it is not that when one attains proper sense control, one becomes dry. Rather, one begins to see everything and everyone in relationship with Krishna. And those were in fact one of those final words which Prabhupada spoke in 1977 in Vrindavan, when most of you must have seen that on tape, where his voice is very feeble, and when he's talking he says, everything, every moment in this universe is moving and acting by the supreme desire of Krishna. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So this is how we are meant to be, that we have to see how everything is related to Krishna and how we have to engage it in Krishna's service. So from our perspective, it may appear like these women are ordinary women. So we have to be very careful. Because as long as we are conditioned by the modes, we begin to think, like for example, Prabhupada said, Atmavan manyate jagat, which means we think the world is just like us. So whatever be our state of consciousness, we think the world is like that. I remember Ravindra Surapru once in one lecture he mentioned that if someone is practicing Krishna consciousness very nicely, they would not be very constantly complaining also. When they look at ISKCON, generally if you notice, the people who always complain are the ones who are not happy practicing Krishna consciousness, who are not properly fixed in Krishna consciousness. So because they are not properly fixed, they are not able to get that happiness. So then everything they see, they find some fault, this problem, that problem. That does not mean that someone is practicing nicely does not see a problem. They also see problems, but they are enlightened, and so those problems don't affect them. Their steadiness in Krishna consciousness, their practice of Krishna consciousness, it does not affect them. They are very steady in their Krishna consciousness. So they can see problems, they can objectively look at it and try how to solve it. Whereas someone who is not practicing Krishna consciousness properly, they are just simply complaining. It's just the mode of ignorance. So in our practice of Krishna consciousness, we have to be very conscious of this fact that we have to be away from the modes. Generally, the modes begin to affect us. They say association is what affects us. If we also have a lot of people around us who are also not practicing very well and who are very cynical, then we also begin to get affected by that cynicism. Like just like we have for the coronavirus protocol. What is the protocol? Social distancing, yes, right? Social distancing, mask and all that, right? So even in Krishna consciousness, the first principle Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says is asat sanga tyaga, which means that we have to keep a distance, social distance from the karmis of this material world. That's a very important principle. If we don't keep that distance, then we're going to become affected, and we are going to get dragged down into their level of consciousness. So it is not something which is to be underestimated. The power of Maya is very strong, and in the material world, people may appear to be, as Prabhupada said, they may wear nice coat, shirt, pant, they may have their own system of morality and whatever it may be, but ultimately none of them are devotees of Krishna. And if we think it is okay, after all, they're okay, they're good people, there's nothing is going to happen, then we associate a little bit. Maya is waiting for that chance. The moment we develop appreciation for any aspect of mundane life, you are finished. It begins with that. It begins with that. And slowly it expands and expands and expands and expands. And before we realize it, we are gone. So everything begins with thinking. That's why Prabhupada, I mean, he gave his book and repeatedly, like sometimes people think, why is it that Prabhupada is so repetitive in his books? But that's deliberate, because repeatedly we have to hear. Like, I mean, I'm from Kerala, and I know that in Ayurvedic therapy, when you go, some panchakarma and all that, when they do that, it's the same massage, they do it over and over and over again. You know, it's kind of a ritualistic thing. They really do it over and over again. So, when we read Prabhupada's books, we should know this. Prabhupada is repeatedly speaking the same thing again and again. I mean, it's not same, it is fresh, but the point is it appears to our mind to be repetitive. But it is necessary. It is necessary because he has come to change the way the world thinks. He has come to change the way the world thinks. So as I was talking in the stage of sense control, the 4 levels of sense control, if our thinking is wrong, everything else is wrong. Feeling, willing, everything is going to get messed up. So Prabhupada has come to give us how to think. How to think. And we may be chanting 16 rounds. We may be following the 4 regulative principles. But if we don't take shelter of Prabhupada's books every day, Prabhupada says minimum 1 hour, if we don't take shelter of his books, then our thinking is not going to be aligned with pure devotional service. So if our thinking is not aligned with pure devotional service, even though we may chant, if we chant with material desires, we chant with anarthas, how the anarthas going to go away? That's why Lord Chaitanya came to give us Bhagavat Vidya, Vairagya Vidya, Nija Bhakti Yoga. He came to give us Vidya. So if we don't have Bhagavat Vidya, how is our practice of Krishna consciousness going to be successful? So when it says Jnana Karma di Anavritam, that karma refers to karma done for one's own gain. And Jnana also refers to that Jnana which is aiming at moksha and things like that. But it does not refer to Bhagavad Jnana. Bhagavad Jnana is meant to nourish us and take us towards the ultimate goal of life. That's why would Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada emphasize so much on the books, so much on the books. And recently I was reading a post by Kadamba Kanan Maharaj where he says, I mean, it's ironic and sarcastic. He says, if you don't read Prabhupada's books every day, he says, I guarantee you that you, after some time, you will feel that Krishna consciousness is stale. Stale, S-T-A-L-E. You know, so we cannot underestimate the power of the mind. The mind, if it starts thinking, it can go in any direction. So therefore, we should keep it under control by reading Prabhupada's books every day. So when the mind is under control, then like Prabhupada says very clearly in the Nectar of Instruction, that one's first business is to control the mind and senses. One has to come to that before even being able to practice Krishna consciousness properly. That's why Nishtha comes after Anartha Nivritti. So it is not that one can practice Krishna consciousness in Tamoguna and still attain love of Godhead. No. From Tamoguna, we have to progress to Satoguna and then go to transcendence. It's not that directly from Tamoguna, practicing Krishna consciousness, we can directly attain love of God. It doesn't work like that. It's just that the process of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is fast. It is miraculously fast. What normally takes millions and billions of lifetimes is just one lifetime. That is why Lord Chaitanya is the most astonishing avatar. It says, Śrī Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Daya Korohe Vichar, Vichar Korile Pabe Chitta Chamatkar. The hairs on your body will stand on end if you imagine the mercy of Śrī Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In one lifetime, so much of work can be accomplished in one lifetime, because we have been conditioned for millions and billions and trillions, even lifetimes of Brahma. So many lifetimes of Brahma, billions of lifetimes of Brahma. So, I mean, Nandanandan is laughing because one lifetime of Brahma itself is inconceivable. What to speak of millions of lifetimes of Brahma? So that is the amount of conditioning that we come up with, that we have come with. And to erase that in one lifetime is just unimaginable. It's like saying that if this room has not been attended to for 100 years and we have to come into this room and clean it in 1 hour, spick and span. It's not going to work like that. I mean, if it's not attended to for 100 years, what is speak 100, let's say 1,000 years, the amount of dirt, the mold, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And to say 1 hour's time to clean up this entire space, impossible. So it is impossible to attain this love of Godhead in one lifetime, but by the mercy of Śrī Caitanya Mahaprabhu, it is very much possible. But we have to have that seriousness. Like Prabhupada, out of humility, when he wrote his purport to Dhruva Maharaj pastime, he says, even if I have one disciple like Dhruva Maharaj, he can carry me back to Godhead. So Prabhupada was so, I mean, of course, humility, he wrote it. But the point is, he expected us that Dhruva Maharaj attained perfection in 6 months, in fact. So he expected that at least in one lifetime, if we can have the same mood and temperament of Dhruva Maharaj and try to practice with that intensity, then it's possible for us to attain in one lifetime. So we can see that as we progress in bhakti, that these same pastimes, once it may have appeared mundane to us, but as we progress, we begin to more and more see the transcendence in these pastimes, how these women are not ordinary women of this mundane world, you know. So sometimes they say fight fire with fire, right? So I just wanted to bring up this point that in the last 1.5 years, we can examine ourselves. How much were we overwhelmed or not, depending on our state of consciousness, by this whole wave of the pandemic? Of course, pandemic is still not gone, but it's subsided to some extent. So we can examine it. So we are actually fighting a much more dangerous virus than the coronavirus. So we can see how much were we overwhelmed by that or not. Were we overwhelmed by the coronavirus? If we are overwhelmed, that means we were not sufficiently Krishna conscious. Of course, I'm not saying that we should have been stupid, but all that I'm saying is courageousness means enlightened courageousness. I'm not talking about courage which is stupid. So it does not mean that, okay, we should have been courageous, we should have given up our masks, given up our sanitizers, and just that's not courage, that's stupidity. Courage means no matter what it is, are we actually feeling overwhelmed by it? Are we feeling overwhelmed by it? Because there's something which is far more dangerous. We are not getting overwhelmed by the Bhavaroga virus, but there is something insignificant, some invisible virus. If we are getting overwhelmed, that means we are really in a very pathetic state of consciousness. We really need to work hard. And so we need to take association of those devotees who can see the truth and who are not affected by it. Affected means you may see them taking precautions, but they're not affected by it. They are fearless. This is what Prabhupada has come to teach us. If he has come to teach us to be fearless of the Bhavaroga virus, what to speak of Corona? We're supposed to be fearless. This is the gift that we have to offer to the world. Even amidst the greatest pandemic that's hitting the world, we can demonstrate that we can be fearless, we can be happy, we can be undisturbed. So we should take every opportunity as an opportunity for us to gauge our level of Krishna consciousness, to gauge our level of advancement. So the pandemic was, of course, it is not a favorable situation, but nevertheless, we can turn it into a favorable situation by seeing, oh my God, what is my level of consciousness, where I need to be, you know. So everything can be turned into a advantage. So that is the whole process of Krishna consciousness. As Prabhupada said, there's nothing called hopeless in Krishna consciousness. Every situation is a situation of hope, provided that is the message that you get from Prabhupada's books. So those who read Prabhupada's books will always remain hopeful, no matter how difficult the external circumstances will be. They'll never get defeated by hopelessness. They will always remain in that state of hopelessness. They'll be courageous. And as I already said, courageous does not mean stupidity. It means that they are not affected by external circumstances. They'll go on with their Krishna consciousness in all circumstances of life. So the reason that I brought up some of these things in today's purport is that we read about these pastimes over and over again, but we should actually desire that we are able to appreciate and relish the transcendence of these pastimes, you know. And what is the obstacle? It's our own consciousness, So our own consciousness is the obstacle. So the way to judge our progress is, as we read the Bhagavatam again and again and again, are we able to relish it more and more and more and more? Or are we feeling, oh, this is so repetitive, I've already read Bhagavatam, let me read something else, let me read something else, something else, something else. Or are we feeling swadu swadu pade pade? Are we feeling that nectar at every step? So when we read these pastimes, we should see how relishable we find these pastimes. If we're not finding relishable, and we think that these women also, oh, maybe they're better than ordinary women. They're not better than ordinary women, they're just different. They're a different category of women, completely pure, completely pure. They have no trace of the contamination of the modes of material nature. So this is the great gift that has been given to us, that we can not only cure the madness, but we can also relish, you know. Like normally what happens is, in material life, when we are diseased, all our activities are also painful. Like when we are diseased, activities are also painful. First of all, you have to come to the stage of being freed from disease. Only then we begin to relish any activity. Otherwise, even ordinary activity like walking also can become painful. But the beauty of Krishna consciousness is, even though we are diseased, even in the disease condition, we can still feel happiness because of Krishna Bhakti Rasa. Even in the disease condition, you can feel happiness. So we can imagine how much more happiness there is in a condition of no disease. So Rupa Goswami prays, when will I have hundreds of tongues, when will I have hundreds of years to relish the holy name, to chant and hear the holy names, you know. So we can come, that is someone like Rupa Goswami who is actually demonstrating to us. So it's a very inspiring thing that, okay, we feel that we are progressing, we feel we have some taste, and we can say this is how it can be one day. And we should feel inspired to work towards that. And the surest way of doing it is to associate with those who got a similar aspiration, who got a similar level of seriousness. So I think I'll stop there. I'm a little bit of a fast speaker because the thing is that I don't prepare for classes, I just talk. So I'm sometimes worried about losing my train of thought. So I mean, forgive me if I spoke a little bit fast. I can see Jalangi Mataji struggling a bit, that's why I felt I should apologize. Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Bhavaroga means the disease of the heart, the disease, the tendency for material enjoyment. That's called the Bhavaroga. Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness. I mean, beginning with hearing Bhagavatam and chanting the holy names. Associating with devotees. Of course, we are hearing it in the association of devotees. Yes, ma'am.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the class. I think they should fix this mic one of these days. It keeps switching off. Anyways, my question. My question is, you're mentioning that we should be happy.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, sure.
You're saying that we shouldn't feel hopeless and overwhelmed. You said, oh my God, what is my level of conscience? Like I am not able to deal with it properly. But another side of it is, we are here in the material world and we are fallen, we are struggling. So what is wrong with feeling hopeless? What is wrong with feeling overwhelmed? Because we cannot imitate a pure devotee. Of course, you quoted Prabhupada saying everything is working under the direction of Krishna, and Krishna is doing everything. And we theoretically understand, but practically we are not there yet. So the whole process of Krishna consciousness is to help ourselves surrender to Krishna a little bit more with our practice. So I would think it's perfectly all right to feel overwhelmed, to feel hopeless, because we are here in the material world and we are not fully Krishna conscious. So that will help us to become humble and take shelter more in Krishna. We cannot just see devotees who are happy and try to imitate them. What do you think?
The highest principle in one's life should be the order of the spiritual master. So here in our case, Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. So he's the highest authority for all members of ISKCON. So there is one anecdote which Jayapatak Maharaj relates, that once when one disciple entered into Prabhupada's room, he was a bit morose. So Prabhupada asked him some question, why are you morose or something like that, and then he gave some answer. Then Prabhupada said, in the presence of the spiritual master, how can you be morose? And he said, I order you to be happy. So that we should consider that as our prime order. In the presence of Prabhupada's books, in the presence of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, in the presence of devotees, how can we be morose? So the point is, yes, we may feel overwhelmed depending on our level of consciousness, but it is not okay. So we should immediately think, Prabhupada has given us an order to be happy. How shall I fulfill that order? So immediately our consciousness should be, it is not okay to be overwhelmed, because I have to follow Prabhupada's order. I have to be happy. So let me find out devotees who are happy. Let me take shelter of Prabhupada's books. Do whatever it takes to get out of this situation. Normally, in the 15th chapter of the 7th canto of Bhagavatam, it is explained that there are solutions for different things. Pride, if one has, the solution is to serve the great devotees. So if one has lamentation, one is feeling overwhelmed due to lamentation, the solution is to read scripture. So like that. So we have to do whatever it takes to get out of it, because the primary thing is Prabhupada's order. He has given us such a wonderful process and he wants us to be happy, and it's possible to be happy. So, I mean, yes, because we are not qualified, because we are fallen, we may feel overwhelmed, that's fine, but that's tamoguna, right? So we have to make an effort to get out of it. And we will succeed, for sure. Yes, you want to say something?
So, being overwhelmed and feeling hopeless is not necessarily being morose. I meant it's a different mood. It's feeling meek and hopeless and wanting to get the mercy of the Lord, wanting to take more shelter in Krishna in the process. Because, of course, when you are with your spiritual master, you're supposed to be happy, because you're supposed to be proud that you have such a master. Like a dog is happy when he has a good master. If a dog has a bad master, then he'll be morose. So of course we are proud that we have taken up this process and we are under Prabhupada's shelter, like he's our Shiksha Guru, like that. But also we cannot imitate something we are not. Like somebody else is happy, we have to get there, but we cannot imitate them. That was my point.
Yes, we cannot imitate, that's correct. At the same time, to feel overwhelmed and things like that are symptoms of the mode of ignorance. So we have to get out of it, because Prabhupada, if you notice the 31st verse of the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, he ends the purport by saying that in the beginning stages of Krishna consciousness, one may not be able to execute the injunctions of the Lord perfectly. Still, one should not get overwhelmed by the sense of defeat or hopelessness. He says that. So, the idea is that yes, we are not supposed to imitate. At the same time, okay, if you find someone who's happy, we can go and serve them and try to solve our problem of unhappiness or moroseness or hopelessness or whatever it may be. Whatever is a negative thing, yes, it can be used as you're saying, yes, but it can propel us to take more shelter. But when you take more shelter, the effect is it should vanish. That's the point. And it should vanish. That's the meaning of taking shelter. That moment we feel hopeless, we take shelter of the books or advanced Vaishnavas. We should be able to see our hopelessness being mitigated. That's very important. And quite often, the problem is that because of our lack of spiritual vision, like when we look at the Bhagavatam, for example, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying generally. When we look at the Bhagavatam, that's why I said we means in general. When we look at the Bhagavatam, we think this is a body of information. But this is not just a body of information like how mundane book is. This is Krishna. And this is Krishna and Prabhupada together, you know. Prabhupada said these are my personal ecstasies. And Bhagavatam itself says that Krishna swadama upagate dharma jnana adibhi saha kalau nashtadrisham mesha puranarko adunoditaha. After he has gone back to his abode, he has come back as the Bhagavatam. So this Bhagavatam is as brilliant as the sun. So Prabhupada also says that one can see Krishna in every page of the Bhagavatam if one hears attentively. So when we approach the Bhagavatam, we should consider that the Bhagavatam is a person, Krishna. And for us, when we read this Bhagavatam, is Prabhupada also directly there in these purports. He said these are my personal ecstasies, so we can associate with him. If we do it with that faith, then it works. Of course, if we have an advanced Vaishnava, we can always go and take their association because they are living the Bhagavatam. So we can take their association, also read. But if we don't have the opportunity to associate with such an advanced Vaishnava, then at least we can take shelter of the books. Yes, bro. It's already 9 o'clock, so those who want to leave can leave. Okay. I'll answer your question, last question, and then.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat. Prabhu, Krishna is realized in different degrees as Brahman, Paramatma and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are attached to the impersonal Brahman or the localized super soul are also partially in Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness. Because the impersonal Brahman is a spiritual ray of Krishna, and the super soul is all pervading partial expansion of Krishna. Thus the impersonalist and the meditator, and also they are also indirectly, they are also in Krishna consciousness.
You're asking, are they or not?
Yes. No, why this differentiation between?
Why is the differentiation?
Why that differentiation?
No, they are not Krishna conscious. Krishna conscious means to only one who knows Krishna's feature as bhagavān is called Krishna conscious. Rest are not called Krishna conscious. One is Brahman conscious, one is Paramatma conscious. Krishna conscious means they have to be conscious of God as bhagavān. So now, Prabhupada gave the example, just like suppose you would see a mountain at a distance. So first you can see only some green color, right? So once you go closer, then you can see some plants and something is there. Then when you go inside, then you see there are so many living entities and things like that. So Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan are not three different entities. They are one God. It's just one God. According to our philosophy, there is only one God, including Vishnu. They are all same only, but just that they manifest to different extents. Okay. So here it is one God, but based on your qualification, you are only able to see only the Brahman or only up to Paramatma, or you can see full Bhagavan. It depends on our qualification. So it's one God. So Krishna conscious means to be conscious of Bhagavan. Otherwise, a Brahman conscious or Paramatma conscious. Yes, they are part of Krishna. There's no doubt in that. But Krishna means you have to know the person called Krishna. Paramatma is only interacting as far as the material world is concerned. He is a sanction. He sanctions and he witnesses. That's all. That's the only function that Paramatma does. He doesn't do any other function. You cannot have a relationship with Paramatma other than getting sanction and getting and being a witness. Relationship you can only have with Bhagavan. So the Paramatma feature is a feature exclusively that operates in the material world for the purposes of sanctioning and witnessing. That's all. So with Brahman you cannot have a relationship, with Paramatma you cannot have a relationship. You can only have a relationship with Bhagavan, which is Krishna. That is called Krishna consciousness. It's like saying you have your hand. Hand is a feature of your body. But you cannot say hand is you, right? Like that. You means the whole you. So Krishna conscious means the whole of Krishna, means Krishna. It cannot be just a ray of Krishna or a Paramatma feature of Krishna. Okay? Thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thy Gaur Premanande.